I am live and I'm happy to be here. And this is our time, our 15 minutes per week that we go live and discuss important things that are valuable to lawyers specifically. I want to say it also can pertain to other professionals, but since I've been working and coaching lawyers for mm, well over 25 years, I think that it would be better for me to just kind of stick to that. And of course, you know that it'll apply to everyone. So we're talking about what if you feel, or what if you know someone, or you might even have children or friends or spouses who tend to be much more subject to worry, anxiety, and stress. And whereas someone else may not be such a big deal, to some it may be. I want to talk to you, who either it's you or someone you know, someone you love, someone you care about. So some people tend to be more stressed out, or they might feel like they have a mental disposition, and that's just natural. That's just how they are. They were literally, many were just born that way, and we are genetically disposed. And so if we think that it's just our physical being or our physicalness that is affected by heredity and things that our parents may have gone through, or things of environmental factors, you want to guess again, because we have instinctual drives that are happening in the background of our mental consciousness. And you know, one of the most important things to me to understand is that while our conscious mind kind of putters along at 5,000 uh, uh, bits of information per second, 5,000 per second is a lot. But when we think of what happens behind the scenes, which is our subconscious mind, travels at 100,000 miles per minute. And I think it's per minute per second. But whatever, you can see the difference, 5,000 versus 100,000. And so, therefore, if we're not really conscious or aware, or become focused on what's happening behind the scenes, we can kind of be like a puppet in a show that's being controlled by forces that you're not even aware of. So we want to talk about that because we want you to really understand that, everyone is made up differently. So if we think about ourselves, I love this analogy, as if we were a puzzle. And so there's, the physical, there's the mental, there's the emotional. And then the bigger part that we don't see, that's more in control than we know, is our subconscious. So, what are some of the puzzle pieces? If we talk about, well, what is the puzzle piece of, I tend to get insomnia from time to time. I tend to be more disposed to needing alcohol more often. I may need to go to my psychiatrist to get medication. I may be more prone to anger. I may be more prone to depression. I may be more prone to isolation. I may be more prone to hyperactivity or workaholism. Every one of us has some sort of coping skill that we develop, or that we've developed as a coping skill. When I take on new clients, that's the first thing we look for. A client can come to me and say, "Hey, you know what, Pamela? I can't seem to get my work done, or I seem to be disorganized, or I seem to be depressed, or I seem to be unproductive, or I get in lulls." The first thing I'm going to look at is that 100,000 miles per hour, per minute, whatever that's going on behind the scenes, because that's what's affecting what's going on consciously and in real time. So, but if we say, okay, so here's the puzzle pieces, and these are the puzzle pieces that I look at with my clients. So the first thing is family history. One of the best places, and my clients will tell you, we do this in the first session. We spend 2 hours going into the family history, and how we do that is we draw the floor plan of the first house that they lived in before the age of 7 that they have memory, because that is, and science does verify this, that is where our major coping skills were developed. We developed our subconscious coping skills mostly before the age of 7, unless something traumatic or something dramatic happens. So, what does that mean? That means that we have these things that happen behind the scenes when we were young, and we developed a way to cope or adjust to it, but it was wired into our brain. Every memory, everything that happens to us is wired in our brain. But what happens when we're really young, because we have no logic, no sort of way to put it in a category or to analyze it, it's just hardwired. Like, this is how life is. This is how life is. This is how you cope with it. And whether that is anger, depression, running away, whatever it is, we develop those coping skills. So, family history, and if your mother and father was anxious, or you were always afraid of things, or there was always this set of insecurity or anger or whatever in your house, believe me, you were affected by it. And either you were affected by it that you do those things, or you do those things, or you find yourself affected and you don't do those things. You do the opposite. So either way, it's the front of the back, the front of the hand or the back of the hand. Either way, you're affected. Another thing is our brain chemistry. I was talking to a client this morning, and if we don't acknowledge that we are basically chemical factories. We are chemical factories because everything in our body is regulated and determined by chemicals, whether we admit it or not. So if you don't believe it, why, when a person has high blood pressure, do they take chemicals to regulate that? Or if you have anxiety, why do you take antidepressants or whatever you take? Because our body is chemistry. Now, we can take outside medications or chemicals, but our body is in itself a chemical factory. So when we're happy, we create really great chemicals. When we're angry, we create those kind of chemicals. And when we're uh, shutting down or whatever it is we do those kind of chemicals. So our brain chemistry is regulated by the mental whatever is going on, which starts from our family history, whether you believe it or not. So however it was we learned to cope, then our brain chemistry kind of has adjusted to that. So some people say, I have to have a drink just to get through life. I have to have a drink just to be able to cope through life. I have to take antidepressants to cope through life. I have to uh, get away. I become paralyzed. Whatever it is, that is your body chemistry. Past experiences all play again in how we react, and whether we're worried, stressed, or anxious more than others. So, for example, in my family, which was very chaotic, there was violence, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of alcoholism, and there was a lot of depression. So those were experiences that I had. I didn't know that I was affected by them. I didn't know, like when I was in my 20s and 30s, why I had why I was depressed, or why I was really over anxious of uncertainty or chaos or things like that. And it wasn't until I kind of delved into going back to the first house to find out what were the coping skills that had me overly sensitive to my environment. But if you are, it's nothing wrong with you. That's the important thing we want to understand. There's nothing wrong with you. It is how you're made up physically. There are things that, we'll talk about it in the next one. This is part one. There are things that we can do to circumvent or to try to tame these automatic responses that we have. But these responses that have been hardwired in our brain from a young age are like knee-jerk responses. They happen before you even know that you're doing it. It's like why a lot of people will say, I know better. And they can tell you, well, next time I'm going to do da 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 da, and then they find themselves doing the same thing again, or same kind of situation. It's interesting. we have repetitive patterns that we repeat over and over and over again. So if you look back in your history, do you had how many times have you had the same boss or the same company or the same relationship or your spouse is the same as your parents or one of your parents usually, and then our children is like one of our parents usually, the one that we have most problems with. And so all of that goes back to family history, and it all goes back to our past experiences, our chemical breakdown. Now, um, stress is like we have this backpack on our back, and we have this, we carry it with us wherever we go. We're wearing this backpack. And then if we get added stress, we put that back more in our backpack. So we don't really process the stress. We don't ever really relieve the stress. We're just walking around kind of in many ways like a victim or being subject to what is the next stressor. What is the next stress? So you almost become a beacon for the next stressor or the next thing that's going to be upsetting. So, say, for example, if you have things that are upsetting at home, and then you have, and maybe you have things that are upsetting at work, and then you go to the traffic, then you have stressors in the traffic, then you look at the news, and then you're more stressed by the news and what the world's going on with the world. And so now this backpack is enormous on your back. And you wonder why you can't function normally, why you're not able to do your work, and why you might feel depressed and where your energy goes because you're carrying all these stress. So, how do we process? How do we think about stress? Some people are able to process stress as they go along. Some don't. Some put it in the backpack, and some take it on personally. Some take it on physically. Our bodies will react to whatever we're thinking. I'm going to say that again. Our bodies are going to react to whatever we're thinking. So the chemicals that we're going to release in our body are going to be based on what you're thinking. If you're thinking that a saber-toothed tiger is following you or chasing you, you're going to get some adrenaline and you're going to get some chemicals in your body that are going to let you be fight or flight. And our bodies are pretty much wired to either we're going to fight or flight. And with fight or flight may not be a saber-toothed tiger. Fight or flight may be a situation at work. Fight or flight may be a situation at home. Fight or flight may be something with a client. So we have to acknowledge. And so the conversation that I'm having today is we want to find out what are the things, like what are our habits. So we all experience anxiety. We all experience stress, but some of us process it in a different way. There's nothing wrong with you. But what it is that you've got to decipher what's going on. You've got to decipher what's going on in 100,000 miles per hour, per minute, whatever it is. I got to look it up, so I'm accurate about that. But really, what we're going to talk about more next time is the biological basis for the way we think, our high sensitivity, how we experience life, and then how we can have compassion as opposed to judgment over these things. So anyway, I'm giving you really a background. I don't know if I'm going to be 2 or 3 talks on this, but I really want you to exercise, number one, compassion. I want you to exercise compassion towards yourself. I want you to exercise compassion towards your spouse, exercise compassion towards your children, your employees, your assistants, because all of us process stress and anxiety a different way. And if you are a person who finds yourself like you're over the top in your reaction to stress and anxiety that actually paralyzes your productivity, then now's the time to actually look behind the scenes to see what's going on so that you can adjust yourself so that you can somehow manage these chemicals that are rampant in your body that are making you go into hyperactivity, hypersensitivity. So I hope this is helpful. Please be sure, if you have any questions, you want to talk about it, you can DM me anytime. And I am glad to be here. And I will be here next Wednesday at 12:30 for your live. Thank you so much for joining.